Right now, you have a messaging app on your phone. Maybe WhatsApp, maybe iMessage. You use it without thinking. You send a message, it delivers, you move on. The man behind 2 billion conversations happening every single day was once standing in a government line, waiting for food stamps. Couldn't speak English, had no money, no connections, no plan. And when someone offered him $30 billion, he said no. Not because he was stupid, not because he was reckless, but because he understood something that almost nobody in that room understood. And by the end of this video, you will too. This is the real story of Jan Koum. Let's go. 1976, a small village outside Kiev, Ukraine. Soviet Union controls everything. The government reads your mail, listens to your phone calls, watches who you meet, what you say, who you trust. Jan Koum grows up in this world, where privacy is not a setting you can turn off. It is something the government already took from you. In 1992, Jan is 16 years old. His mother makes a decision. They are leaving. They arrive in California. No English, no money, no network. They move into a small apartment, government subsidized. His mother cleans houses to pay the bills. Jan mops floors at a grocery store, and they collect food stamps to eat. The average American household earns about $75,000 a year. Jan's family qualified for government food assistance just to survive. The same man who would one day be worth billions. But every night after his shift, Jan went to the public library, checked out programming books, and taught himself how to code. No tutor, no class, no YouTube. Just a teenager and a borrowed book and a quiet obsession. That obsession? Privacy. He had watched a government steal it from millions of people, and he wanted to build something that gave it back. That is not a business plan. That is a wound that became a weapon. Jan teaches himself enough to land a job at Yahoo, one of the most powerful tech companies in the world at the time. And there he meets a man named Brian Acton. Quiet, sharp, principled. They become close friends. After 9 years at Yahoo, both of them decide they want to build something of their own. They apply to Facebook, rejected. They apply to Twitter, rejected. The two men who would one day be worth a combined $15 billion got rejected by the companies that are now their competition. In 2009, Jan buys his first iPhone, and he has a thought. What if your contacts list was also a messaging app? No ads, no spam, no data collection. Just talk to people, simply, privately. He calls it WhatsApp. The first version crashes constantly. Downloads are almost zero. Jan almost quits. Then Apple releases push notifications, and overnight everything changes. People in Brazil start downloading it, then India, then the Middle East, then Europe. By 2013, WhatsApp had 400 million active users. The entire population of the United States is 335 million. Jan Koum, the kid from the food stamp line, had built something more people used than live in this entire country. And that is when the phone calls started. Google called first. Let that land for a second. Google, over $1 trillion in market value, knows more about you than your own family does. They flew Jan out, private meeting, big number on the table. Jan said no thank you. Why? Because Google's entire business runs on your data, your searches, your location, your habits, your conversations. And Jan Koum, the kid who watched a Soviet government spy on its own citizens, was not going to hand 2 billion private conversations to the world's biggest data company. So he walked out. Then Yahoo called, his former employer, people who knew him, respected him. Same answer, no. People around Jan were losing their minds. His friend said, "Jan, what are you doing? Take the money." Even people who loved him could not understand it. And here's the thing I want you to understand about those two rejections. Jan's no was not random. It was not ego. It was not stubbornness. It was principle. He had already decided before anyone called what he would and would not accept. And because he knew that, no one could pressure him. No one could wear him down. No one could make him feel desperate, because desperation is the most expensive emotion you will ever wear. Then Mark Zuckerberg called personally, not an assistant, not a lawyer, Mark Zuckerberg, and the number he put on the table, $30 billion. I need you to stop for a second and actually feel that number, because we say billion like it means nothing. $30 billion is more than the GDP of Iceland, an entire country, more than NASA's budget for the next 7 years combined, enough to pay off student loans for over 600,000 Americans, wealth that your great-great-grandchildren would never spend. $30 billion on the table in front of Jan Koum, the man who used to mop grocery store floors. And he said not yet. He did not negotiate on price. He negotiated on terms. He told Zuckerberg 3 things. No ads on WhatsApp, ever. No selling of user data, ever. My team stays protected, non-negotiable. Zuckerberg pushed back. The number dropped to 22 billion. Jan held firm. 20 billion. Jan held firm. 19 billion. Jan held firm. They settled at $19 billion with every single one of Jan's conditions met. No ads, privacy protected, teams secured. Now, here's what most people get wrong about this story. They say Jan lost $11 billion. Jan did not lose $11 billion. He traded $11 billion for the guarantee that everything he built would stay exactly what he built it to be. That is not a loss. That is a man who knows the difference between price and value. Most people never learn that difference. Jan built his entire life on it. All right, let me give you the actual takeaways from this story, because a great story with no lesson is just entertainment, and I want this to do more than entertain you. Lesson 1. Desperation is the most expensive emotion. Studies show that Americans who negotiate their starting salary earn up to $1 million more over a 45-year career. $1 million left on the table because they were afraid to ask. Jan turned down Google. He turned down Yahoo. He turned down $30 billion from Facebook, not because he didn't need money, but because he refused to let fear make his decisions. The moment you become desperate, the other side wins, every single time. Lesson 2. Decide your non-negotiables before you walk in. Jan knew his limits before anyone called. No ads, no data selling, team protected. Everything else was flexible. When you know your non-negotiables ahead of time, nobody can wear you down. Nobody can make you feel unreasonable, because you already decided what reasonable looks like before emotions got involved. Write yours down before your next job offer, before your next business deal, before your next big decision. It's the most underrated thing you can do. Lesson 3. Patience is a financial instrument. If Jan had taken Google's first offer, let's say $5 billion, he would have missed $14 billion. By waiting, by being patient, by trusting that what he built was worth more than the first number anyone offered. America right now is addicted to speed, fast food, same-day delivery, instant results, and that addiction is costing people fortunes. The best deals in history always went to the most patient person in the room. Lesson 4. Your starting point is not your ceiling. Jan came to this country with nothing. No English, no money, no network. They moved into a small apartment, government subsidized. His mother cleans houses to pay the bills. Jan mops floors at a grocery store, and they collect food stamps to eat. The same man who would one day be worth billions. But every night after his shift, Jan went to the public library, checked out programming books, and taught himself how to code. No tutor, no class, no YouTube. Just a teenager and a borrowed book and a quiet obsession. That obsession? Privacy. He had watched a government steal it from millions of people, and he wanted to build something that gave it back. That is not a business plan. That is a wound that became a weapon. Jan teaches himself enough to land a job at Yahoo, one of the most powerful tech companies in the world at the time. And there he meets a man named Brian Acton, quiet, sharp, principled. They become close friends. After 9 years at Yahoo, both of them decide they want to build something of their own. They apply to Facebook, rejected. They apply to Twitter, rejected. The two men who would one day be worth a combined $15 billion got rejected by the companies that are now their competition.